Yeah. Yeah, typically people also because it's good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from whichever part of the world that you're watching from. And welcome to this talk show here at the World Water Week, which will be all about the margins to the center, bridging borders for SDG6. It's so lovely that you're tuning in with us here, whether it's online from home or whether you're here with us in the room in Stockholm. We're very delighted to have you here with us today. Now, my name is Haji Yacoubi. I am a former United Nations Youth Representative for the Netherlands, but above all, I am honored to be your moderator for this talk show today. And not the least of which, because the topic of it crosses into such a fundamental element within the challenges that we have with regards to making sure that we reach the goals by 2030 for SDG6, amongst others. So today we're diving into how the Center for Advocacy and Research is advancing clean water and sanitation for all, particularly in marginalized informal settlements of Bhubaneswar and Jaipur that we'll be diving deeper into specifically today. We'll explore how they are bridging the gaps between communities, policymakers, service providers, government, to really make sure that we can make SDG 6 a reality, especially since the 2030 deadlines are looming and we are still facing the threat of this imminent climate crisis that we're in. So that's a very important topic to discuss today, and I am very honored and delighted that I have an expert here with me to help guide us through that conversation. So it is really my pleasure to welcome to the stage here with me today, first of all, the Executive Director at the Center for Advocacy and Research from India, Akhila Sivadas. We're so happy to have you here with us.
Thank you.
Akhila, I mentioned Bhubaneswar and Jaipur in the introduction, as those are the specific communities that we'll be diving deeper into for these next 20 minutes. But just maybe to get a bit of a general sense of understanding, why are we looking at those communities specifically? Can you tell us a bit more about the context of them?
Firstly, thank you very much, and what a wonderful introduction. And I'm very happy to be here on this occasion, World Water Week, and particularly talk about from the margins to the center, because now that's absolutely essential to reach our targets of SDG 6. Why are we talking about Bhubaneswar and Jaipur? Well, if we had to capture that in a couple of words, we'll say people are due to climate change, but even prior to climate change, what we call, predetermined conditions, they're facing intense privation and hardship. They're not only bogged down by poverty, but a lot of, indignities and extreme squalor. That's something that is, difficult to imagine. If you had seen Slumdog Millionaire, you would have got some idea of what Danny Boyle, showed on that. One of the biggest slums of Asia. Dharavi in Mumbai, in Bombay.
Right.
That's actually capturing it. And, and the kind of shocks they go through. The recent pandemic is one big example. They've been left bereft and probably pushed back by 20 years. Whatever the little gains they made, just pushed back on every front. And the adverse weather events, both in Bhubaneswar and in Jaipur. Bhubaneswar is a coastal town, and all coastal, areas are under immediate threat. As early as 2050, it's estimated that all of them are going to be submerged, and they're going to face huge problems. It's a new town. It actually grew out of a super cyclone, and learnt from that experience, and has built around it, and has a huge indigenous population. So that is one part of it. And Rajasthan which is where Jaipur is, one of the capitals, very drought prone. It's the desert, and the desertification is, increasing.
Right.
But what is important in all of this is the face of the, suffering, or the face of the deprivation, and that's women. Largely women, and all the connected groups, persons with disabilities, transgenders, diverse genders, elderly, the whole huge swath of what we call, scheduled castes, that is less privileged castes, and indigenous population. But I'd like to just end by saying that, there's a lot of hope in these populations because they have huge resilience and are very resourceful in crisis. They're all the time prepared. for crisis.
I
So.
love how you say that, because it's like when I listen to you speak, and on the one hand, when we talk about resilience, there's the side of it where you see the almost like mentality resilience, the innovativeness, people that bounce back, after every crisis and everything that happens, that takes strength, it takes determination. On the other hand, you're also, showing very clearly with what you're explaining that, when a pandemic hits, setting communities back, when weather events hit, it sets them back. And that is also this different sort of like systemic resilience that requires proper, as you say, moving from the margins to the
To the
center.
center.
How do we ensure that we get resources in place? So when you say that, if we look at the needs also of urban poor communities, but then specifically also the fact that they are so resilient and that they have a lot of insight and on the ground wisdom and experience to bring to the table, how do we make sure that we also make them a part of the solution when it comes to promoting social equity and also these specific cases?
So, no, you've actually hit the nail on the head, because this is all about what we call the double-edged effect.
The double edge. Oh,
When
tell me about
everything's
that.
going well,
Yeah.
they're very easily forgotten.
Right.
And there's a sense of, shall we say,
Yeah.
even arrogance even over nature, arrogance over people.
Yeah.
But when the going gets tough,
Yeah.
they're on their knees and they know that it's only the people that can actually, come to everybody's sort of, salvage the
Yeah.
situation. And this is no different, And one of the things that happened during the pandemic was the urban poor actually decided to walk back. And we saw this colossal phenomena called reverse migration. They just started saying bye-bye to the cities and walking back. 3,000, 5,000 miles they walked back. They cycled back with their children.
Wow.
And they made a very powerful testimony. And people had to go down on their knees and say, please come back. There's nothing we can do with you. In the urban areas, your informal work and workers are contributing 85%.
85%.
5%.
Wow.
And if you look at the national portal,
Yeah.
where they're registering the unorganized workers, there's something like 50% are women.
Yeah.
So you can imagine they're at the, shall we say, at the cutting edge. You can't get any closer.
Yeah.
And so the realization is there that you can't do without them.
Right.
And there's also a lot of camera, there's a lot of TV, there's a lot of media. There's nothing you can hide. There's no closets. When we have big conferences and dignitaries coming from all over the world, they even sort of somewhere try to camouflage the grim side of the city.
Right.
But that's not possible.
not
That's
able
all over.
Yeah.
Today you're on real time. You're communicating.
Right. You see everything.
So, now they realize that it's
Yeah.
important. So, that's one thing I want to underscore.
Yeah.
That there's no denial about, urban poverty.
But then when you say that there's no denial and there's no hiding in plain sight, so to say, the powerful testimony indeed of people moving back to, as you said, reverse migrating to the local communities where they came from, then the cities realizing 85% is a striking number, how crucial they are to the functioning of cities. Why, if we take all of that into account, why is then still the case that these urban poor communities are not as included and integrated into city planning and development as
Yeah.
they should be?
Yeah. So, I think there are what we call both structural, which is even beyond the control of a system.
Right.
In all fairness.
Yeah.
It's not that the system is one big villain, and the community is. It's
Yeah.
not like that.
Yeah.
There are structural impediments. If you take something like skill, if you take something like literacy, if you take something like, women's empowerment or women's, position or status,
Yeah.
there are, shall we say, entrenched inequities.
Yeah.
It hasn't come since India became independent. It's been there for centuries.
Yeah.
So you are fighting that. Therefore, people like us who are not within the system but have a ongoing relationship with the system are constantly influencing them. To look at it through new lens. And communities bring a lot of strength You know, they bring not only strength of numbers, but they bring strength of concern and care. Because they know what it is to feel deprived. Their emotional quotient is
Right.
very, very high.
Yeah.
And that's time and again, demonstrated. So the point is to find the pathway to integrate them. Orient them, skill them, train them, empower them.
Yeah.
Put them at the center. Never work for them or by them. Let it be of them, by them, for them. Play the role of a quiet facilitator. Steer it as quietly as possible. Without drawing attention to yourself. Because finally, the last person on the block is actually responsible for everything that goes on. That's the principle of any work.
Yeah.
The minute you leave the office, you're out.
Yeah.
The person who's there handles it. You don't take that proprietorial interest outside. So I think that level of confidence and trust we have to build.
Yeah.
And it has to be demonstrated.
Yeah.
There is no quick fix
to do it, right?
for all this.
Yeah, but I love what you say at the core of it is that you don't do it for them, you do it, you let
They
them
do
do
it
it by them, by
Yes.
themselves.
And we do it in large numbers. We don't create coteries.
Right.
We don't create, again, a set of people that empower themselves over the people.
Yeah.
All that we have,
So maybe can we get zoom in on that a little bit, because when you say sort of that it needs to be community led, and when we look at community led WASH projects, can you just share a little bit more with us also what the role of data is? How do you use data to sort of guide these community led WASH projects?
Yeah. So when we say community led,
Right.
it doesn't mean that there is no professional involvement or that there is no expertise or there is no technical. It's not that kind of, romanticizing that is, community led.
Yeah.
But when you are actually in a real situation and you're trying to transform the real situation, and you begin at the beginning, you don't join midstream. You start something at the beginning, and that's the advantage we have with, in the context like ours.
Yeah.
For instance, urban sanitation doesn't exist, didn't exist for the poor at all.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the first thing that is, compromised. Then everything else follows. All the deprivations, all the, whatever, violations at the human rights level follow.
Yeah.
So when we actually began, large part of it was like the poor reimagining that, part. They didn't join midstream.
Right.
So everything from laying a pipeline to, getting water tested, to actually working out ways of conserving it, to all of that was, then captured at the data level.
Right.
Yeah. I was just telling Jocelyn yesterday that if you stand outside a slum and say, take a guess how many people are there inside, you will with great, hesitation say 300 or 400. But when you step in, there'll be 7,000 people.
Wow.
It defies human imagination.
Yeah.
So they have to come in. They have to tell you exactly how many people.
Yeah.
Who within that, what is the hierarchy of the most excluded?
Yeah.
What is their kind of, condition? What are they compromising?
Yeah.
And in a day and age like this, there's no way that, we can be, shall we say, blasé about it or not be indifferent or apathetic to it.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
it'll come back to bite you.
Yeah,
The pandemic showed it very clearly.
Yeah.
Nobody was spared.
Yeah.
The mosquito is not going to spare you. Any of the other viruses are not going to spare you.
It doesn't see.
It'll come back. So the public service and the public health and the public hygiene becomes very critical. So they give you the data, and not only that, they track it on a daily basis. Because that's the way you will build the narrative. The link is not built by saying one thing in the beginning and, showcasing something in the end. The devil lies in that details of the in-between.
Right, what happened in the in-between.
What you do. Have you done any harm?
Yeah.
Have you left out anybody?
Yeah.
Have you been, has there been integrity in what you've done? And the whole in-between in the WASH system is awash with, what they call intermediaries who talk on behalf of the community and very often are exploitative.
Yeah.
This data prevents all of that, prevents wastefulness, prevents, whatever, usurpers,
Yeah.
come and usurp your, right to speak.
Yeah.
All of that. And
Yeah.
that's where, and we have a public dashboard,
Yeah.
which the community contributes to. Every week, the data is updated.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes it goes up,
Sometimes
it goes down.
Yeah.
And end of the month, there's a full debate, full reflection. Why has it gone down?
That is so good. So you take the moment to properly monitor, evaluate.
And then again,
Yeah.
detailed proposals are prepared.
Right.
Budgets are created
Yeah.
because you have data supporting
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, indeed. It's backed
Nobody,
up.
even the
Yeah.
the hardcore
Yeah.
finance man,
Yeah.
they're always finding ways to say no.
Yeah.
They love their power to veto.
But you're like, I have numbers for you.
I have
What are you
numbers.
gonna do
And
now?
I have it
Yeah.
in flesh and blood. I mean,
Yeah.
they're here to
Yeah.
tell you.
Yeah.
This is
But
not me
that is
talking
that
to
is the
them.
thing, because like the example you gave of like if you would look at a slum and try to, you said it defies human imagination. So nobody
Defies.
can speak to that experience except if you are a human being that is in that situation and that knows what it means to live it.
Yeah.
So given that the work that you guys are doing every day to make sure that you have the numbers, that you have the data to back it up, that you look at what is the story that sort of leads from one data point to the next, what would you say is very specifically and concretely needed then to even furtherly bridge the gap between policymakers and communities in order to make sure that we have a more inclusive approach?
So two things.
Okay.
We have 2-3 tiers of governance.
Right.
And the last tier of governance is very, very disempowered.
Yeah.
Because it's very dependent on the first and the second tier.
Okay.
It's also, largely sort of, shall we say, the professional experience is largely that of engineers, technical people. Because,
Right.
you have to run the city.
Yeah.
And this is where we step in.
Yeah.
And where, you actually build what are called somewhat, we can even crudely call it a shadow, kind of governance, where people take over the day-to-day management.
Okay.
We have formed what is called community management committees.
Okay.
And the third tier has devolved some of the functions
Yeah.
to an entity called Slum Development Association.
Okay.
But even the Slum Development Association can, become narrow in
Right.
its focus because there are 5 to 8 people.
Yeah.
So they are, supported by the Community Management Committee and the
Right.
Sanitation Subcommittee. They are the ones who gather the data.
Yeah.
They are the ones who go house to house. They are the ones who extend all the cooperation and support. Sometimes, they're laying a pipeline.
Right.
And you may have to even remove a hutment.
Okay. So that's for the first one. It's almost like covering each other's blind spots there,
Yeah,
right?
and ensuring that, it's household focused. In a city, you can lose track
Yeah.
of the micro.
Right.
You're so caught up in the macro.
Yeah.
You're so caught up in beautifying the big
Of course, yeah.
and the,
yeah.
obvious.
Yeah.
You can forget the people.
Yeah.
So they are here, they're like conscience keepers.
Yeah.
They're like, duty bearers.
Yeah.
They're like, representatives of the people.
Right.
So they go, and what we have done with them is we have given representation to every group. So if there is a less privileged class,
Yeah.
they have representation.
Right.
If it is an indigenous population, they have representation.
make sure to
if
get
there are
their-
transgenders and diverse genders, they
Yeah.
have representation.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So we have ensured that they speak to their constituency, they bring it back.
Yeah.
In the monthly meetings, they raise all the issues.
Yeah.
And they take full responsibility.
Yeah.
It's not like, you just generate a
Yeah.
demand.
Yeah.
You close the loop of supply. You
Yeah.
ensure that whatever comes. And they've also been trained to
Yeah.
understand the technical aspects, to
Right.
understand the regulatory aspects.
Yeah, and I love that you say that because that's the element that sometimes gets missed out on, right? That you have inclusion and representation, which is amazing. But then can you also properly sort of equip people with an understanding of the technicalities and everything, so that they can engage in the most
They can
equitable
engage.
way? We're
I
approaching
just
the
want
end
to
of the talk show.
mention one point.
Yeah.
They're also, skilled plumbers, masons, workers. They've actually built the city.
Yeah,
So how can you,
yeah,
trust or distrust their
yeah.
judgment?
Right,
They know the
indeed.
city.
They're on the ground. Thank you so much for saying that, Akhila. We're approaching the end of the talk show, but maybe just finally, very, very briefly, if you could, what is one last main hope or takeaway you hope that people leave this session with?
Okay, so the main takeaway, I think, is what we call a human-centric approach.
Okay.
WASH has particularly suffered from in excess of what we call an engineering approach. So
Right.
we need a social re-engineering approach.
Right.
It's ridiculous when we talk about, human ingenuity.
Yeah.
And, people can't respond to a nature's call.
Right.
Millions. It's
So
not
it's
just a few numbers here and there.
yeah. Yeah.
So I think solidarity, support,
yeah.
constantly keeping that at the center,
I
because
love it.
everything else can be subsumed.
Yeah. That's the only way
Under
to go from the margins to the
the
center, you
center.
would say. Thank you so much,
you.
Akhila Sivadas. Thank you so
Thank you
much for
very
being here with
much.
us. Thank you for tuning in with us if you're watching from home. And to all those here in Stockholm with us, thanks for being here. It underlines the importance of the topic. Thank you all so much. So we are